I do love this time of year. Autumn, when you've got the abundance of the harvest. Here you can see my beautiful grapevine and the beautiful colours of autumn. Those leaves are starting to turn yellow now. Just a beautiful array of colours and produce. Now, I suspect, like myself, you probably thought of hops as being only used in beer making, but of course, there's many other different ways you can use it. Herbal medicine, cooking, baking, in different soft drinks. Just unfortunately, we're very limited in our scope in the UK. We don't tend to use foods other than very limited capacity, but there is so many things you can do with this. Now, what's great about hops is that they tend to grow like a weed, really. They're a bit like grapevines. You literally cannot avoid but to grow one once you've planted it. You can also eat the shoots that come from the hop in the springtime. So what you do is, in the wintertime, you're going to cut down the plant to ground level, and in the springtime, it'll send up shoots. And you can actually harvest these little sort of purple shoots. They're hollow, they're soft, edible. I can't really think of anything they'd be similar to, but you can cook those up just like, I suppose, like green beans or something like that. And you can harvest those right from probably about the end of Feb when the first shoots come up, all the way through till the beginning of May when you're ready to let the plant just grow and do its thing. So you can see in this image, the hop plant is on the right-hand side, tucked in next to that huge hazelnut bush, but actually, interestingly, I've got like 4 different plants there. I've got the grapevine you saw on the outside of the fence, and I've got a goji berry bush, which is pretty massive as well. I've got the hop plant, and then I've got the hazelnut. It's almost like I've discovered the 4 sisters. I mean, they're just within a couple of square meters. I've got those 4 big trees, and they're really, really prolific. As you can see here, I don't have an awful lot of hops, but then again, you don't need a lot to make beer unless you're literally making it on a grand scale. 20 grams per gallon is all you need. So we're just going to pull them off the plant. These would be known as wet hops, containing somewhere around 80% moisture. Now, obviously, this is ideal if you're going to use them fresh. Nothing's better than using fresh ingredients even in beer making. But if you do want to store them, some people do freeze them wet. The real killer, the real thing that's going to degrade the hops is oxygen. So if you can actually get all the air out through some vacuum device or something and then freeze them, they will store. But they will certainly store a lot longer if you can dry them first. This is what we used to do in the olden days. We used to dry them in these things called oast houses. Now, you probably see a lot of these in the countryside now. I doubt there's many examples left of the original buildings. A lot of people, especially rich people, tend to buy these converted hop houses just because they look fancy. I think it's criminal because ultimately, if everything went pear-shaped and the zombie apocalypse happens, we've got no way of brewing beer, which of course is vitally important for the survival of humanity. Anyway, most people call me a Luddite, but obviously you can see the cone on top of the building essentially acts like a chimney. They would have lit fires underneath the hops and dried them very, very slowly, and then the exhaust gases would have gone out through the chimney. Now, of course, not even I'm that much of a Puritan that I'm going to build myself an entire hop house to roast 10 hops that I use all of the year. Here's an example of an easier way you can do it that doesn't use any energy and fossil fuels, and that is to simply air dry them. Now, obviously, you want to be doing this in warm temperatures in the summer. You're going to put them on something ventilated. In this case, I'm using a display basket, but of course, you could use anything like a fly screen balanced over a couple of chairs. What you don't see in this picture is probably you would have a fan blowing to, what you want to dry stuff is always heat and ventilation. So you're getting the heat from the ambient temperature, but you need to ventilate it with a fan. But of course, they might end up blowing around the place, throw a bit of Hessian over the top or some sort of cloth, breathable cloth, out of direct sunlight and out of the rain. And that works perfectly fine. It may take a few days to dry. And the litmus test as to whether or not it's completely dry is when the stem inside those flowers, inside those cones, snaps. The next 2 options are to dry them either in an oven or a dehydrator. Now, some people claim that you can dry them at very low temperatures, the lowest on your dehydrator, which would be around 40 Celsius or 104 Fahrenheit. But some recipes actually allow you to go up to 60 Celsius, certainly no more than that because that will destroy the hops. I ended up settling on about 50 Celsius. So either that's in the oven or in the dehydrator. Just keep checking it every now and again, but typically you're looking at about 8 hours at 50 Celsius. The problem is every hop is different. Even every individual harvest is different because you don't know how much moisture content there is in the hop depending on the weather and so on. So basically you want to check it after about 6 hours. But you want to get it to a point where they're not burnt, obviously, but they've dried up enough that the stem inside the hop cone itself snaps easily. And this should indicate a moisture content of around 10% when you're done. Now at this stage, a lot of folks will use these things, which are hop pellets. Essentially what they've done is taken the dried hops, blitz them into a powder, and then compress them down into these little pellets. And yes, they do look like animal feed, the sort of thing you give to lambs and sheep when you go to a small farm. But they save a huge amount of space. Now there are several ways to expel the oxygen. In this case, I'm using one of these resealable bags. The simplest way to do this, which is actually pretty effective because the hops will squash down, is to just push it down with your hands. The second way I've found is I've got this little miniature Hoover attachment kit I use for cleaning my car. Don't get down in all the nooks and crannies. So you just put this little tiny hose in the corner and suck all the air out and then just seal it tight, and that's absolutely fine. A third option is just to cram as many hops in there as you possibly can to really minimise the amount of oxygen in contact with the hops. Now for the next option, we can employ a bit of technology. In the background you'll see one of those vacuum sealers, that black machine, and what that does normally is to seal those single-use plastic bags over various items to suck all the air out. It's very good at what it does, but of course it creates a huge amount of waste, all that single-use plastic that just ends up going into landfill, and of course that's fossil fuels. We don't want to be doing that. But what it also has is an attachment, as you can see in these pictures here. It goes over the mason jar. You just put the lid on, but you don't put the ring on. It sucks all the air out of it, and then you just tighten the ring on and job done. There's various incarnations out there. There's also manual ones, which will have a single pump on top of the jar that you have. But what's also neat about this system, apart from being fairly low tech, is you can actually vacuum seal things you put inside there. So you can actually put a standard jam jar in there. It doesn't have to be a mason jar. You can put your hops inside, put the lid on fairly tight, not completely tight, pump that pump at the top, and it will actually extract the air out of the jar. And then it will, and you'll see, you know, normally you have a little button on top of the jam jar lid that will pop down. You know that it's taking the air out. And finally, we just pop them in the freezer. They should last up to a year, ready for beer making or in cooking. Back to the hop plant itself, we now need to do one more thing to prepare it for the coming winter and ensure you get a bountiful harvest next year. Hops grow from rhizomes which live underground. Essentially they are the roots you see in this picture here. In winter we want the plant to send all its energy into those roots and remove all the succulent green part above ground which can be damaged by frost and ultimately potentially kill the plant. And the way to do that is to prune it down to just above the crown after the first frost, which is usually in the UK around the beginning of November. Now, I've not actually done this because I've been too busy over the last few years, and I've got a perfectly functioning hop plant. I don't touch it at all, and it produces loads of hops every year. But it really depends how many hops you want. Obviously, if you keep cutting it down, it's going to make it more vigorous. It's trying to fight to survive, and obviously it won't be damaged by frost. So the thing is, of course, we're getting much more mild winters as of late in the UK due to climate change, so maybe it's not getting as much frost damage. In any case, this is certainly best practice. Anyway, guys, hope that was useful for you. If you like the video, please hit the like button and subscribe. I'll be making more videos on sustainability, permaculture, repairs, and so on. So we'll see you on the next one. Cheers. Bye.